This is the rebirth of Whole Earth Radio.
Hello, this is Rob Seaman, and you are listening to Whole Earth Radio, The Rebirth. Today is episode 7, a conversation with Stuart Tomc. And Stuart Tomc is not just a good friend of mine, he is also the Senior Vice President of Human Nutrition at CV Sciences Incorporated. He has been one of the pioneers, really been at the forefront of the movement to bring cannabidiol, CBD, from cannabis sativa to the forefront as an herbal medicine, as a natural supplement, as something that is recognized and used. And Stuart, thanks for being on today.
Rob, it's so great to see you, and it's so great to be here. And just one small point of clarification, Dr. Douglas Mackay, ND, Dr. Duffy Mackay, for those that know him, he runs the division now. So he's the Senior Vice President of Science, Regulation, and Education, and I work in that division as well. I just want to make sure to have that clear as a publicly traded company. And we are so honored to be here today to share the good news, to share the breaking news with your audience and with the world on how we have finally answered some of the big looming questions about the safety and potentially the efficacy of hemp CBD. And we put out a press release just recently about two landmark papers published in the Journal of Dietary Supplements. One is a small randomized control trial that shows safety using our product. And the other one is a really important landmark assessment of how we tracked 5 million bottles, and we were able to determine that the product is indeed safe. So both of those studies are now available and online at the Journal of Dietary Supplements.
So that's good news for not just every company selling CBD. That's good news, in my opinion, for the entire dietary supplement industry, because to have that kind of safety data around not just your product, but any product, doesn't that answer the question that people are always asking, are these things regulated? Are these things safe? And now we have compelling clinical analysis, right? I mean, this is peer-reviewed, 2 different peer-reviewed analysis of consumer data.
Well, it certainly helps to answer the question. If we first put on our most skeptical caps, as we always do here at CV Sciences, we are a publicly traded life science company. The ticker is CVSI, Charlie, Victor, Sam, Ida, CVSI. And as a publicly traded company, we always have to put on our most conservative hat first. And that doesn't always sit well with people inside of our natural product dietary supplement industry. So first of all, we wanted to acknowledge that and recognize that. And at the same time, we hope to demonstrate to others with our actions exactly what you said, Rob, is that this is good news for everybody. This is good news for the entire industry. So we're not here to hog the spotlight, and this isn't just a vanity project that CVSI is engaged in.
Right.
We started in 2014 to demonstrate to the world that hemp extracts with very low THC, hemp extracts are dietary supplements. That was our thesis in 2014, that if you took food fiber hemp and extracted that plant, the same hemp we were all comfortable eating, many of us, as hemp seeds and hemp protein, take that same exact plant and extract the seed, the stem, and the stalk, creating a paste, an extract. We determined in 2014 that that was a dietary supplement. Rob, and we are now able to say with confidence that we believe that it is, and it meets not only all of the requirements, in our humble opinion, we're also able to demonstrate after selling 5 million finished products. That's 5 million bottles of a finished, branded, tested hemp extract to prove that product was safe for the intended use. So I don't know if it answers the capital TH truth Aristotle answer to the entire question, but it certainly helps people know that when they take our product that it's safe, and it's safe to assume that if you take a similar amount within reason, as long as the CBD is in there, that the argument that it may not be that safe is becoming upended. So that's why it's good news for the entire industry. I also want to say this, Rob, if you grow your own, that's a health freedom conversation that you and I have had for many, many, many years. We never, ever want to come on this show or any show insinuating that the only way to get CBD is to buy our brand. That's not fair. We know CBD works. At least we think it does. So for those of you that have been growing it at home and have access to your own cannabinoids, and we have been catching up over the last 10 years, we acknowledge and recognize that you probably have some great stuff you're growing at home that's equally as good. It may not be in a bottle like this. It may not have a QR code where you can scan it to go directly to a certificate of analysis, but we are not going to come here and deny the fact that these cannabinoids appear to have some magic.
Well, and not just even growing at home, but there are folks with cannabis medical clinics, that are doing some really good work on full test cannabis, on high CBD extracts. I mean, there's a lot of good work being done. And I feel like this kind of good research supports all of that, from the person growing at home to the person running a cannabis clinic to, ideally your competitors to some degree, because
oh no, I absolutely, and thank you for pointing that out. I went from sort of one extreme to the next. I went from the commercially available products and health food stores at the second, plus CBD among others, to the far extreme that this is an ancient plant and we've been studying it and fascinated with it for a very long time, and there are many herbalists that have taken it very, 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 very seriously. And to your point, the cannabis doctors, they've been working sort of under the shadows. I spoke to one just the other day. I won't mention his name, maybe not appropriate, but he's just remarkable MD, practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, who runs now a COVID clinic in a tent outside in Petaluma near San Francisco. And he also does research with ketamine. And he's a fascinating guy. And traditional Chinese medicine, MD, acupuncturist, who's a cannabis doctor at a cannabis clinic. So Rob, he's hitting the disciplines from every angle. And he was sharing with me some of the latest research that he's been following that's been going on in Israel, not the immune modulatory COVID conversation. We'll have that. He was mentioning to me that a certain researcher that he knows was growing the same genetics in different locations and finding such different variations of compounds in the plant that it even upends the idea of any kind of reproducibility. So if you don't have reproducibility with a cannabinoid terpenoid ratio, meaning if it changes every time, and anyone that's ever used cannabis,
which would be a natural variance because it's a natural product.
And they also know that if you go to a dispensary, for example, and I live here in California, and if you're interested in this plant and you go back and try to get the same thing, it may have the same name and it may be different.
Right.
It may have the same name and it may be different. Now that would add to the entire lexicon of why you'd want to give this to your grandmother.
For sure. And, you are an expert, and I really like to do this thing of asking, I could ask some questions, above, my pay grade perhaps, but I'd like to start with some of the basic questions, because I think that you are such an expert that you can probably give the best answer to some of the potentially simplest questions. I just wanted to break out a few things. You bring up giving it to your grandmother. One of the things that I heard said a lot is that the difference between, you've heard this, the difference between marijuana and hemp, and people will try to make it that they're different plants, right? They'll say, well, marijuana has THC and hemp does not. Or, that's kind of the thing that people say, that I sort of look at them and go, is that completely true? And, that may not relate directly to safety, but I think when we use words like psychoactive and we say, Grandma, this is not psychoactive, but it'll help with your anxiety. that leaves me puzzling as well, where I think we're using some terminology to make people feel safe that I wonder sometimes if it's, completely accurate.
Well, you're right. There's been gross oversimplification. So thank you. Let's start at the beginning. What is CBD? And then we'll address the idea of psychoactivity or lack thereof. And what do all of these terms mean? CBD, cannabidiol, was discovered in 1940. And most people don't go back to Doc Adams, Roger Adams, in 1940 discovered CBD. Now, it wasn't fully elucidated until years later, but CBD, cannabidiol, is simply a molecule that comes from the cannabis plant. Now, we can argue about the potential genetic differences between low THC food fiber hemp, the stuff that you make rope out of. You could argue genetically, and we do and others do, that genetically that the food fiber hemp plant that has a gene that controls the THC production, the true food fiber hemp plant that you make rope out of, that we use to make our products, has a gene that prevents large amounts of THC from ever being produced, like a seedless watermelon. So even though it is all cannabis, and CBD is simply one of the cannabinoids, a molecule in cannabis, and we put the word phyto before so that we know it comes from a plant. It's a phytocannabinoid. Now here's the little secret, one of the secrets with CBD that I love to share with people. CBD is really not made in the plant very much. There's only a very, very small amount of CBD that's naturally occurring in the hemp cannabis plant, because that CBD is in a different form. It's in its earlier precursor form in the plant that limits.
CBDA?
Yes, that's called CBDA. And all these terms scare the daylights out of people. That's why I try to.
I actually know that one, so it can't be too hard.
But a lot of people have said, what do you mean cannabidolic acid? I don't want acids. I don't want any. Remember when we were working with Nordic Naturals with omega-3, and people would say, please don't call it omega-3 fatty acid.
Because people think they're going to get fatty.
Right. They don't want to hear that at all. So I want to acknowledge always the natural fear, the human fear, and the sort of the adaptation cycle that's sort of required to get comfortable with this new language. So when I had experts, and thank you for the compliment earlier, Rob, but I'm just a meme spreader. That's my job. I'm a meme spreader, and I'm constantly finding information that I think is good, and then
you're a subversive. You're a subversive. That's what you are. You're trying to upset the apple cart with your truth and your science, and I love you for it.
Well, I also want to work on the inside too. So I sort of love the idea that, I work here at a publicly traded company and have for many years. This is my 6th year. So it's kind of a great way to kind of get inside and really make change, really true change. And what you said earlier about how this news and all of these discoveries help the entire industry, that's true. Now, if we can benefit, do well by doing good at the same time, take care of our people first, take care of our shareholders, and create new things, well, that's why we're put here on Earth. Anyway, getting back to the subject, CBD is an ingredient in hemp, and there's almost none of it in cannabis because it's in this precursor form. What does that mean? Nature keeps the CBD and the THC. The plant keeps THC and CBD in this precursor form. And think of it like this, Rob. You've got this precursor form of these cannabinoids in the plant, and animals are around munching on the cannabis flowers all day long. They don't, but some hypothetically, right? Now, the reason that a lot of animals don't like to eat cannabis flowers is because, they've got that strong smell, that aromatic cannabis smell.
I've heard of that.
Those are these volatile terpenes.
Yeah, and the different terpenes contribute to that smell quite a bit, and they're found in other flowers. So they're
everywhere. They're ubiquitous in nature, but what they do, they're not here to get us high. I mean, they do, but what they do is they attract good bugs and they repel bad bugs. And they actually create these, compounds.
Secondary metabolites, right?
Absolutely. And it's a defense mechanism. There's all kinds of other funky things in the plants that the plants make, funky in a good way, to keep the animals from eating them. And so what I'm saying is, if you ate raw hemp, you're going to get CBD and THC in its precursor, raw, naturally occurring form that has very little traversability through the blood-brain barrier, meaning it works more in your body. We call it the periphery. So there's an argument to be made that raw hemp that has CBDA in it, that's the naturally occurring cannabinoid. And that you don't get CBD, Rob, until you take that CBDA and you gently heat it and you break off the CBDA, the acid, and that's why you heat it overnight to change the CBDA precursor to the more active CBD, which now does cross the blood-brain barrier. So to your point, we never said that it wasn't psychoactive. We said that CBD wasn't psychotoxic. That word scared people. We also said that it was safe for the intended use, and that's what the paper that we published proved. That the product that we're making, this one here, in the amount that we found to be generally recognized as safe, after we sold 5 million units, was safe for the intended use. So that really helps to put some of the story to risk, that what we're doing here is misinformed on some level.
I just wanted to make one connection there, what you're talking about, the heating of the CBDA, turning it into the more active in the body form, CBD, and that would be decarboxylation, right? That's what occurs through heating. Is that a direct parallel to what happens with THC through heating and smoking? Because that's what we were told at some point, when people would talk about cannabis in a classroom setting, they would say, well, you get a very different effect if you heat the cannabis without heating it, because the decarboxylation hasn't occurred. So the I guess in that case, it would be the activation of the THC, which is also heat driven.
You're 100% right. And one of our upcoming webinars with Dr. Jamie Carson, MPH and ND. He's a cannabis doctor here in California and a paid consultant, an expert who works in the field. We just conducted a little conversation like this the other day, Rob, and he reminded me again exactly what you said. It's a cannabis doctor, and he said exactly what you said. When you steep the raw cannabis flower in, say, hot water, it isn't hot enough to convert the THCA to the more active THC. Now, all of this is getting to our question. Say it again, Rob.
I just said it's not hot enough to make the chemical change.
Yes, it's not hot enough to make the chemical conversion of THCA to THC, the active form. So he reminded me again, small structural changes in cannabinoids confer vast difference in what they do. In fact, he reminded me that THC and CBD are so similar, except for this little tiny tweak. And I encourage everyone, in fact, we'll make sure to send some graphics over. We just drop them in. We're doing it right now on this conversation. Look at CBD and THC. Look at them right next to each other. Look at how similar they look. Look at those structures. That is mesmerizing. That's mesmerizing because I've been so interested, as others have been so interested, in how small changes add up to big effect. Small changes, the compounding interest of good behavior or bad behavior, just the idea of something small that makes a huge difference. Well, if you look at CBD and you look at THC, you will see that there's a very, very small difference, and it means everything. Now, what do I mean by everything? I don't think there's a person watching this show, unless, of course, you've never, ever, ever used cannabis ever. Once they try CBD, if they've ever tried THC, they will understand that that tiny change, that little chemical difference right there, means the difference between being high and not. I've been trying to communicate that in as many ways as possible. Did that work this time?
Yeah, no, I think that makes, and I think maybe I could relate that to the average consumer that maybe may not understand some of the technical or be aware of some of the technical side of things, but may have tried a variety of products. They may have bought something, and we should make a plug here for the health food store. I know we both come from a health food store background. They are important community centers to us. I think it's safe to say we both believe in the health food store, the reputable independent health food store, as one of the best places to get natural medicine. So I just want to say that in the context when I say that people may have tried a variety of CBD products and had some that work and some that don't, and have no idea how those products are different because of the variety of and the wide variety of labeling practices and the way that people are talking about their product, where we actually, in trying to be legal at various points in time, some companies have kind of been getting vaguer instead of giving, or more vague, I should say, instead of giving people more information on what product they're taking, where it comes from, what kind of chemistry it has. We're playing games with people, because to some extent, we're talking, we could get really specific about what are in some of these products, but there's always this push. How much does the industry and how much do regulatory bodies want us to tell them, about what's in their product? So I thank you for being so transparent and so information driven, because I think people are better served when they know the specific chemistry as much as possible of what they're taking.
I could not agree more. And the deeper we get, the more information we collect, and we all have access to the same internet. It does not behoove anyone to oversimplify anything. And I've been saying for many, many, many years that is the future of all sales. That is the future of all sales and all selling. People love to buy, and we very much don't like to be sold to. And so we've practiced this technique, and you and I have worked together for years. It comes from this book called Obliquity. And it's this concept that our agenda here for CV Sciences is to introduce you to our company and to introduce you to our products, PLUSCBD. It's great stuff. You might really like it. A lot of people do. You should try it. And if that's my agenda, to sell you something, I've got to find the most honorable, ethical, moral compass in order to do so, to not offend people.
The most honest way.
Which is hard because that's a term that makes people nervous. So that's why I try to get as much information as possible. I want it to be as much data driven, and I also acknowledge bias. I acknowledge bias in myself and in anyone else. And so that's why the deeper you get into the cannabinoid conversation, if you're listening to Rob and I say that every product has to stand alone, because we have 500 different compounds in the hemp extract. So when you take the hemp plant and turn it into an extract, you have 500 different compounds. So if you think of the 100 different cannabinoids and the different terpenes and terpenoids and flavonoids and fatty acids and all these other compounds, and I heard the other day from one of these great cannabis doctors I was just mentioning that some researchers are finding that no matter what you do, that reproducibility is almost impossible. That's why more standardized products, like a standardized omega-3, and I was there when that happened, a standardized EPA and DHA as an analogy was different, Rob,
right,
than fish 50 years ago, right?
What isn't the challenge with a standardized botanical product? And I'm being a little biased here as an herbalist. If we're trying to get that entourage effect, right? We are trying to get as much of the diverse chemistry of the plant, but yet give people a standardized dose. You want them to have the same milligrams every time they take the product. That's the goal, right? how do you, bottle lightning with having a broad spectrum extract that is the same every time in every way, or are we only focusing on the marker compound?
Well, now let's explain that to everybody, because Rob just took us way deep in a very exciting place. Okay. What Rob is talking about is that when you call out a compound on the label, the way that we call out, say, the amount of cannabidiol, CBD, on the back of the label, as soon as you call that out, that marker compound, you must test for that and make sure that it's in there every time. So now Rob has suggested, what about the non-marker compounds, and how much variation do we find in that? And that's where I believe that we can find the best of both worlds. And that's what we've done here at CB Sciences, in our very humble opinion, because we took the very standard food fiber hemp that has now been bred consistently, especially in Europe. Do you know this, Rob? They've been growing that food fiber hemp in Europe for years and years, because they've been looking at helping to include it in, say, hay, so that cattle can eat it. And they've been wanting to track that very small amount of THC to make sure that it doesn't bioaccumulate get into infants. So they've been studying this feral, we call it ditchweed, for a long time.
Are they adding that to feed for the omega fatty acid content? Or are they trying?
They wanted just to have it be just, food, just
biomass to feed.
Just biomass, right? Yeah. And so there have been some conversations. So that shows you how sensitive the sensitivity has been to the THC component. So we can say, unlike the high THC cannabis varieties, or we call them chemovars to be very accurate, unlike those that are open to a little bit more susceptibility, the doctor who I was speaking to the other day told me that the cannabis growers that he's been speaking to, Rob, say that you need to test the pH of the water every single gallon. Let's use that as an example. He said, I'm not going to do that. That's a different product. So to answer your question directly, I think we achieved the sweet spot. Food fiber hemp, the food fiber hemp that we're growing in Holland, and the food fiber type of hemps and the other hemp that we're growing here in America, when we look at that stuff through GC mass spec, and we're working with a huge organization right now to look at every single compound in there, and we lay them over one after another, test after test, we find a lot of continuity in the background. We find the variation in the cannabinoids.
We talked about the terpenes a little bit earlier in terms of just generally giving the flower its smell, that sort of impact of the terpenes. But what about the clinical implications of the terpene mix in that spectrum?
Well, it's now being widely debated. One of the papers that I'm going to recommend that everybody take a look at, and you can see that right now on the screen, it's called Targets of T-Cell Response. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong one. Fighting the Storm, Novel Anti-TNF-alpha and Anti-IL-6 Cannabis Sativa Lines to Tame Cytokine Storm in COVID-19. Now, wait a minute.
It's quite a paper title.
Before we do that, we've got to mention HERBALGRAM. We want to make sure that everybody knows that one of our favorite friends and leaders of the herbal world here, Mr. Mark Blumenthal, right there, in the latest issue of HERBALGRAM, says we're not recommending any of these products or endorsing any of these products as a treatment for COVID-19. He says that there are no natural treatments and there are no pharmaceutical treatments. So we never want this to be confused with an endorsement to buy a product. I am now talking pure science. The author of this paper, which we're putting up in the show, and the link to a podcast recently with this doctor, Igor Kovalchuk, and you can actually watch him say it. We'll put the links in the show notes at the bottom of the show so that you can watch the podcast. I was speechless, Rob. I watched this the other morning at 6 a.m. in the dark of my kitchen, and it's a scientist, cannabinoid scientist, to answer your question. He's looked at every different cannabinoid and terpenoid ratio. I shouldn't say every, that's not fair. He's looked at many different cannabinoid and terpenoid ratios in relationship to not just the cytokine storm and COVID-19, but cancer. And he has found, Rob, that our oversimplified entourage effect is completely inaccurate. It's actually stupid. Totally stupid. First of all, the entourage effect has nothing to do with the plant.
Does it make a difference if we call it the hemptourage?
Well, I made that up. So that's, that's wrong when you make up a word, but we did, because we were trying to explain that an orange may be different than a crystal of vitamin C.
It's still a legitimate concept in botanical medicine. I think the entourage effect is real. It may be stupid in this context. That's what you're saying?
Oh, no, I'm saying yes. But I would be very careful because I know sometimes I can be very intense. The point that I'm making is there is not one secret entourage, secret formula in a secret strain of purple Donkey Kong Kush grown in some small patch on the mountain in Afghanistan. That doesn't exist. Get it out of your head.
Right.
That is ridiculous.
There's no magic bullet cannabis.
Pardon me?
There's no cannabis magic bullet.
No, not at all. You know what, according to this scientist, different cannabinoids and different terpenoids at different ratios in different people under different circumstances at different doses do different things at different times. So that's why I want you to listen to him say it. He says the possibility, the complexity, the possibility of being able to reproduce these products where they're just so different, the ratios can change so much, you have to judge each finished product on the branded product. So this is now, I'm making a hardcore pitch here. You can't make your favorite wine that you love the same way, no matter what, even if you have the vineyard. You certainly can't do it at home.
Well, and there have been a number of articles published in that HERBALGRAM publication that you held up there, arguing for variance in natural products, rather than a hard, fast standardization.
Let me finish answering that question because I want to make sure I didn't miss that, right? You asked about measuring those other compounds.
Right.
We are measuring the other compounds through these GC, scientific ways of analyzing every single tiny little thing that's in there. And we're also finding out which of those compounds are what we call the rate limiting factors. Which of those compounds are limiting any of the safety, the signal of safety. And that work that we're doing that's published in the Journal of Dietary Supplements, where we gave our finished branded product, this product, to 65 healthy individuals and found out that they ate less, slept better and longer, and reported enhanced quality of life. Okay, it's only 65 people. Yes, it needs to be repeated. It needs to be 6,500 people. Yes, it needs to be repeated. We found that it was safe.
0.03% of adverse effects.
Say it again?
You said 0.03% of
But there were two studies. In the healthy people, with the 65 humans that we gave this exact product to, we saw that there was no signal towards harm. It was a proof of concept study. So I hear any skeptics that say, it's only 65 people and they were healthy. Okay, let's address that. You cannot extrapolate these findings to another population, say of sick people. And you're not allowed to recommend CBD or dietary supplements to sick people unless you're a doctor with a stethoscope around your neck and you're writing the patient a prescription for the FDA-approved CBD to treat rare forms of epilepsy. Going back to what you said at the top of the show, we've made compromises in this industry. We've made deals in this industry to say certain things and not say certain things. And I think that puts our audience at a tremendous disadvantage because they have to climb through all this, right?
You're talking about the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, which when folks are marketing any kind of natural dietary supplement, we are bound by those rules that we are not going to make disease claims. We are not, even if we have evidence in most cases that a product may help with COVID-19, epilepsy, cancer, we are bound as ethical marketers of dietary supplements to not make those claims. That's what you're talking about. I just wanted to clarify and say the word déchet, because you and I and everyone that works in a health food store know it so well. It's why the customer comes in and says, why won't you just tell me that this cures cancer? Does it cure cancer or not? And they're sitting there going, it supports the structure and function of your endocannabinoid system. And the customer is very confused because we are bound to not make health claims. I just wanted to jump in there and
No, thank you. I have found that concept makes people really uncomfortable. And there are new people to our industry all the time, new people in the industry all the time that are stunned when they realize it. We've hired people here that claim to have known this fact, that work in our industry for years and years and years. And when put to the metal with an ingredient like CBD that's as gray as anything we've ever had, you really cannot cross the line. Now, my boss, and he'll be watching this, hello, doctor, he points out that the main thing is it can't be misleading. It has to be truthful. So when we say CBD is an ingredient in hemp, and emerging research suggests may have tremendous benefit in modulating the immune system, potentially as an anti-inflammatory. However, consumers of our product, PLUSCBD, are reporting that they are eating less, sleeping better and longer, and enhanced quality of life. They just feel better. They just feel better. Now, we're not making a claim. We're able to point to the science, to mention the science, but not say that this product will cure your cancer. First of all, CBD does not do that, just to be clear, but we don't say it. That's why I want everyone to know that the science that we put out, we hide the Easter eggs that you're looking for in the papers. Now, I
love that.
I know it seems cryptic that we're not going to come out and just spray it all over the place. We're not just going to say it. But I like this idea, Rob, as a full-time communicator. I like the idea that don't listen to anything that I have to say. No, don't listen to anything. In fact, why don't you go to PubMed, PUBMED.gov, and read our work from the beginning. Go back yourself. We started in 2014 with a dream. We had a dream that CBD would become the #1 selling dietary supplement in the United. It wasn't even legal yet. And we were obsessed with this vision.
You did
and
it.
You know what we did? We did everything you're supposed to do with a new dietary ingredient. Every single thing. We spent a fortune. You remember?
Yeah.
Giving it to rats for 14 days.
Tell your boss that I know this is the absolute truth. And this is not because we're great friends. I have heard other people say this of you. I'm just going to give you a little bit of kudos here. I don't know of any other single person that I would largely credit with the creation of an entire category in our industry. I can't think of another person. Yeah, that's the guy that's responsible for the creation of that category of nutritional supplements. I think I would give you largely credit for that, and certainly of it reaching the tipping point, because you're such a great communicator and you were such an honest communicator. You have such a good reputation that people in the industry trusted you. And rightfully so. You had all the things that would lead them to trust you, the science and things like that. These studies are just further adding to that credibility and to the credibility of the company, and of the category. The category of CBD and of hemp-derived products is well served by the way that you have brought it. Now, once you did that, once you reached the tipping point, it got crazy. It got mainstream. It's being sold in the hardware store. It's being sold in the drugstore. people are making claims because guess what? Ace Hardware has never heard of Deshay.
Right. I just want to say one thing before we go forward, though. And thank you so much for the compliment. And I'm a joiner. I'm a joiner. See, I think starting something is really overrated. I learned this in a TED Talk. It's one of my favorite TED Talks. Have you seen the TED Talk of the guy that's outside at the music festival dancing by himself, all alone?
No.
Everybody looks at him. Have you seen it?
No, that sounds great.
We're going to put it in the show notes. It was part of what started this entire movement. It was part of what started the movement because it's a story about a person who just starts getting out there and they're dancing and he looks a little silly, kind of really ridiculous. And you can see where it would be embarrassing because we are self-conscious as humans. And there's one brave soul that walks up to this lively human and starts shimmying and, dancing. And at first it almost was like, oh, okay, you want to dance? Making fun of the person. I don't know for sure. I might be reading into that. What happens is other people catch on. And I'm sure you can imagine pretty soon the entire mountain's dancing. And it's a beautiful story about how starting something is overrated. Joining something is where it's at. And that's why we called it Join the Evolution. Join the Evolution. Yeah. Before this new ad campaign where we came up with, does this shit really work? Right? Is this shit safe? Because I remember we did all this work. We spent all this money. We're taking all this care. And we turn on the fear machine, which is the interweb. We turn on the fear machine and it says, CBD will kill you. The moment this thing, wait, let me get this right. The same government that said that this stuff has no medical benefit starts insinuating that the only one with medical benefit is the one the government has approved. Did you see how the whole thing fell apart? It was great just to watch. When you've been caught red-handed, like you've been lying your whole life, and you finally, remember? This stuff had no medical benefit. Now this is the biggest money-making opportunity since, since we struck oil. So it's really funny to watch the rats and the roaches and all the people with their agendas that are being so intellectually dishonest try to cut everybody out of the market. I met the woman who is the lawyer for the big pharmaceutical company that owns this, basically, in terms of the FDA's opinion. And she said to me, yeah, Stuart, it's cannabis. I've been hearing it my whole life. She says to me, this time it's different. With this plant, it's different. Think about that. You're a pharmaceutical company. You spend $1 billion. You prove CBD actually works. And you've got every single joker on earth growing and saying, I got the same thing. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't have the same thing because I really know, we know they do incredible work. They do incredible work. To make a pharmaceutical grade cannabis extract like that pure, that consistently, year after year, that's hard to do.
And I just want to, while we're having this discussion, highlight sort of the altruistic way that you and I look at health food. And I know that, you're on the clock, you're vice president, you're working for a publicly traded company, but because I know you and I know your heart and I've worked with you quite a bit, I know that just what you're saying about being a joiner is because you have some kind of affinity for the idea of a movement in the health food world that will change the world. And I have thought about this quite a bit. We get lost, like you said, in the laboratory details and the this and the that. But if we talk about making the world a better place, if we have a product that might potentially make people's hearts and minds work together better, I mean, really, that sounds like, to some people, that might sound like Peter Pan stuff. But I think that's like scientifically within reach. I think we can, maybe we can't make those health claims, but if we start from supporting the structure and function, and as soon as, I know I'm, to be honest, I'm saying the endocannabinoid system, and you might say, well, now research is questioning, isn't there some paper saying maybe it's not the endocannabinoid system at all, right? It's you
saw that. You caught that one, right?
Yeah, you were.
That's a real naysayer, though.
that's an outlier, right? That's not the.
But it's worth a debate. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I'd love to have you on again and delve into some of the kind of level 2. Not that I'm certainly not qualified to get into level 2 cannabis chemistry, but I can follow. I have enough organic chem to and experience with plants to make the jump. Cannabis wasn't always the most interesting plant to me. This is what really, it was always been there. And it's great, but I get lost in ashwagandha and passion flower and skullcap and why
I like skullcap.
Yeah, there's so many cool we were talking about I'm going to go on my ingredients wrap. I'm going to start talking about PEA and there's so many cool things in the natural world, aren't there? I mean, there's so many potential remedies that someone could benefit from. And it's great. I think it's absolutely great that CBD has the spotlight. And I'm glad that you and other people in the health food world are using that to steer a responsible conversation. And you know what I've been saying the whole time, as CBD's star has risen and suddenly people are buying it in these peripheral retail outlets like Ace Hardware. I love that example because I just do a double take, The pool store, the pool supply store is selling CBD. That's what happens when you go over the tipping point. But when you go back to the health food store or perhaps an independent pharmacy or practitioner, which is where I think you should be getting your CBD, maybe you can have a conversation that not only is CBD not the only thing that you might take to support the structure and function of your nervous system. I mean, it's like, have you people ever heard of L-theanine? I mean, it's a lot cheaper. Try 200 milligrams of that. I'm not dissing CBD. I'm just saying, have you ever heard of kava kava? You and I know the power of these botanicals. I just think it's interesting trying to fit ancient medicine into the paradigm of the modern convenience market and to get big picture in the context of what we're dealing with right now and what everyone's dealing with, this COVID-19 shit. And right now we're having a racial reckoning in America. I mean,
yes.
I don't know what snappy answer either one of us has for that, but I just wanted to acknowledge, as you and I were acknowledging before we went on, this is where America is right now. And it's like Childish Gambino says, this is America.
Yeah, it's so true. There's very little to say other than change.
Yeah. But I not to relate it in a sales pitch kind of way, but I know you believe, and I firmly believe that if we make people better, legitimately, we make the world better. And that is one of the great things that we can say. If we have
I tell you this, it's impossible. I'll speak for myself. It's impossible for me to be as empathetic and as kind as I aim to be when I am sick.
That's deep.
It's a double-edged sword. Now, I have had great experience of getting myself well by being of service to others. So that's been a technique. I learned it from Mother Teresa. I'm a meme replicator. I copy everything that's good. I copy things that are bad.
God bless.
I just copy things. And one thing that I copy the CEO of this company, Mr. Dowling, who shows up every single day. And this is now my 6th year of being here. In CBD years, that's like 60. Everyone says their industry is like dog years. So I know I'm probably being egomaniacal when I say it like that, but it does feel like 60 years. And he shows up every single day, especially during this the COVID situation. And then the last several days, it's been very, very, very difficult for the entire country. And we put out a letter, which we can put up in the show notes. I would be very honored to share that with the entire audience. My boss sent out a letter to the CV Sciences team about where our company stands and where he stands and what he'd like to see and what he's committed to in terms of change. So it made me feel really good, on the deepest level. I'm able to say with a straight face, we've employed a lot of people. We've helped a lot of people. We've eased a lot of suffering. Just the fact that people are using PLUSCBD whether they should or they shouldn't, instead of dangerous drugs or other ways to manage their neurosis or anxiety, that's something to be really proud of. How about we just go straight up all Galen, pure placebo effect? How about this does no harm? How about Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis, who's one of our medical advisors, who was at the Pentagon, and he was on the ground when bird flu and SARS broke out. I mean, this guy's just incredible. You've met him, I think, Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis.
I know Dr. Lewis.
You know him when he was first introducing omega-3 to generals at the Pentagon. He told me the way that he sold it to him. I'll never, because we've been in this vitamin racket our whole lives, right? He said, I looked at the general and I said, may want to try this, sir. No side effects.
There you go.
No, that was no side effects. Okay, ready? You take as intended, one pill from 5 million products, 0.03% adverse events, almost no, that's zero, no side effects. What were people taking it for? Well, the healthy people that took it got healthier. Now, Rob said something about the Dichet and the law and how about this? You can't give non-medicine food supplement to sick person to cure person. You can give food to a healthy person and make them healthier. We gave 1 capsule a day and people ate less, slept better and longer, and reported that they felt much better. We made healthy people healthier. That was peer-reviewed and published in the Journal of Dietary Supplements. And then we went out and sold 5 million bottles we have, tracked it, and found out, we can say this for sure, it's safe. Our product is safe for the intended use. Now, I know it takes a long time to get there, but that's really all we have, to Rob's point. Other than, like this researcher here, that's suggesting, wow, if you look at each individual cannabinoid and terpenoid, you might find interesting things. Rob, he says in this paper, Fighting the Storm with Cannabis, Fighting the Storm, he says some terpenes aren't anti-cancer. I'm still dissecting the paper.
Right.
Some of these compounds don't help, they hurt.
They may be carcinogenic.
I mean, everything, the dose makes the poison, for crying out loud. I was on a show the other day, and I love the newest generation. My son's 17 years old. So there's some younger people that are out, on YouTube, good YouTubers that are in their early 20s. And she just was so excited about CBD. She said, wow, it's great. I'm taking it for everything. It's curing everything. And from what I read, you can't overdose on weed, right?
Oh my God.
Well, I had to slow that down. I was
Slow your roll.
Well, first of all, you're perfect and you're young and you're healthy. So you already have that going for you.
Yeah.
On top of it, all this is a tool in the tool chest. I want to get back to what you said about all the other stuff that's being ignored. All the other stuff that's being ignored. I'm going to throw one out that I like. Some TCM, that SHL formula, for example, the one that the World Health Organization says is the most widely used cold and flu remedy on earth, because there are poor people and that's their medicine.
Is it
it's got the flower, the fruit, and the root, the SHL. Do you know that one?
Okay. I thought you were talking about yin chow for a minute.
Yeah, this is very similar, but no, this is the one that has the skull cap. It has the root, and they found the boculin that's in there. Rob, they took the SHL formula and they turned it into an injectable drug approved by the FDA in China. Do you know this?
No, I injectable
Chinese,
SHL.
Right, listen, it's herbal. This is going to be the crescendo of our show. It's herbal remdesivir. What? Wait a minute.
I love it.
Listen, they took the Chinese formula. Now, this isn't the one that's thousands of years old. This is like a couple hundred years old. And then Mao made a big deal bringing that. Now, I'm not just, don't write me hate mail. He was trying to prove that they had something. Who's they? The Chinese, 2,500-year-old medicine. So if people had been using this fruit and the flower and the roots, when they felt the fire in the throat and the wind in the belly, the moment, and we all know you take airborne as soon as you get sick. We all know you take oregano as soon as you get sick. I sold oregano, as you know, for 10 years almost. But you take that SHL, that Chinese traditional formula, because they didn't have drugs, the moment that you can, what does it do? apparently it disrupts viral replication. So they identified one of the active compounds in the skull cap root. Then they concentrated it, turned it into an injectable drug, and they're using that for SARS and for COVID. Now, wait a minute. Don't you want to buy the oral version of the injectable version of what they're using to treat this thing on the ground in China? It was selling itself off the shelves, because guess what? They knew in China what to do when the word broke out. They knew what to do. As soon as you feel the fire in the throat and the wind, you got to, because that's during the viral replication. Now, again, I don't want to go too far off topic, but I listen to a lot of science podcasts. You might want to get it early. I'll just say that. You might want to get it early before this thing replicates like crazy in your body, and then you're dealing with the cytokine storm. And that's where the cannabinoids, interestingly enough, are immunomodulatory. Unlike steroids that cause massive global suppression, cannabinoids are neuro and immunomodulatory. So it may not be a finished and branded product, Rob.
Yeah.
But it'll end up being a drug made out of cannabinoids. Many, including the ones we're making.
And, there are many different things you can take, but to your point about catching it early, that's why I really love the mushroom throat spray.
Yes.
Of getting it right, not just balancing the immune system, doing all these things that mushrooms.
So you got to get it right there in the throat.
Right
That's
there.
Where this thing replicates. You got to get it right there. I also like, in the big mushroom debate, I love the idea of the fruiting bodies when we're talking about the killer cells. And there's a great argument to be made on both sides of the mushroom conversation.
Right.
But when you look at the science, what do you think? Isn't there evidence on both sides? Fruiting bodies versus
mycelium? Absolutely. And I think I have been referring to people, it's a sticky wicket, isn't it? This whole COVID-19. I mean, everyone is talking about it, and we are in the business of dietary supplements, so we have to walk this line. I keep referring people to the Weil Center, the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, FAQ, on COVID-19. And what he has to say is that if you get COVID-19, not if you're trying to prevent it. So this is Dr. Weil talking. I'm not talking about preventing disease, right? I'm quoting Dr. Weil. But if you want to prevent that disease, you could take a variety of mushroom extracts, but that specifically, if you get the disease, you should only take Mycelia and not the more targeted pharmaceutical polysaccharide extracts. Like over in Asia, they use the prescription lentinan, and PSK, these novel polysaccharides that are from fruiting bodies, but moreover, they're highly specialized extracts. People in our industry used to love, take the beta-1,3 glucans, and being holistic food people, I think I am always going to come back to Mycelia, because I believe that it contains more of the broad spectrum of healing compounds. But there are certainly applications of fruiting bodies. I eat them every day.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. When we look at the ongoing conversation, it's a great conversation. And I'm so happy that we can have this nice spirited conversation, because what we're doing at CV Sciences is we're trying to thread that needle that you're talking about. We're trying to thread that needle that you're talking about, because we are a public company.
Yeah.
And when we say something and there are a lot of eyes on us, we have to make sure that it's factually accurate and that it's also backed by science. So in the world of some of the immune products, some of those more standardized and tested clinical products, maybe not the ones that you've talked about, but some of the other ones that are floating around in our industry, Epicor, for example, and some of these, have you read some of the science there? Is they've taken these ideas and they've put them to the test. And that's why I like the idea of the SHL as an example, that they knew hundreds and thousands of years ago that these plants may do something. They figured out then a couple hundred years ago that this formula, the fruit, the flower, and the root may be more accurate. They then, because of the GC mass spec and the technology, are able to identify these weird compounds that are antiviral, that are in the root, that just interrupt viral replication. They knew that, but how did they know that? then the FDA in China approves it as like, you know, traditional Chinese remdesivir to compete with all the drugs in the West. I love the idea of like my grandmother going to a hospital and getting a prescription cannabinoid drug. Like, for example, there's another company, Rob, they're taking CBD and putting it into a topical gel. You heard about this? And they're using it for Fragile X and behavior modification. What? You're rubbing, like, you know, we got this little roll on here. You kind of roll the CBD for pain. They have just straight up gel, putting hundreds of milligrams through skin for crazy behavior issues. That's not what this is. This is for a bum shoulder. So someone says, you're using topical CBD to treat crazy diseases. No. This is Ben Gay, man, with CBD, and your skin responds immediately. Your skin responds immediately because of this hypersensitivity. CBD actually is a counter irritant. Isn't this cool?
Yeah.
Mast cell, G protein 55. That'll probably be called the CB3 receptor. This is camphor, menthol, and CBD. Bum shoulder, great. This isn't for Fragile X. That's when they take pure CBD, put it into a gel, and you have hundreds of milligrams that are driven through the derma because a lot of these sick kids couldn't eat enough of it. So where am I going with this? It's all good. That's why it's great news. It's nature and science. It's nature and science. So let's go back to something we all know about fish. That way we're not getting so cannabinoid here. Remember, fish is good for you. People that ate fish died differently. Remember, Bill Lands taught us that. I like that.
Yeah. Different
Most
outcomes.
people in general, if you ate fish, you might die differently than if you ate more meat or land animal food, right?
Right.
That's what he said. Now that's a big what does that mean? Okay, that's interesting. Omega-3s do different things than omega-6s. Okay. CBD and THC do different things. Okay. They're different structure, remember? Different function. So now we know omega-3 and omega-6, different structures, they do different things. Let's look at the omega-3s. EPA and DHA, and GLA, and DPA, and ALA. Oh my God, there are a whole bunch of them, right? All different structures. They all do different things. So yes, omega-3 is good for you. We put it in breast milk, in infant, replacement for breast milk. You need to have that DHA that's in there. And you also have the arachidonic acid that's in there. Where's the omega-3 that's in there? Well, that would be the DHA form. Why don't we have the EPA form? Do you see how complicated we got from fish is good for you? Now we have two FDA-approved omega-3 drugs, two. Hundreds of companies all competing to see who can sell you the purest, safest, freshest omega-3 oils. It's in the lexicon. Now check this out. Last year, or was it earlier this year, the FDA approved highly concentrated EPA that lowers death 25% in treatment-resistant patients. It's part of standard of care. That's a fact right now, right at this second. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to take 4,000 milligrams of EPA every day. You might not even be able to get the prescription. But I promise you this. If you're listening to what I'm saying and you're hearing that the FDA approved EPA for that indication, and someone says, we're having fish tonight for dinner, you might smile.
That's beautiful.
And that's the story I'm trying to tell with cannabis when someone says, but mine's better. For what? Well, if it's for epilepsy, it better be the one from the pharmaceutical company because they're the only people that got that thing right. And no one else can do what they can do, and that's a drug, bro. Well, no, but the stuff I get at the dispensary, the purple Donkey Kong Kush, that's the magic. That's the answer. Right on. That's great. We believe you, and that's great. Good. Keep doing it. Whatever works, man. Hey, and if you get too stressed out, take some more CBD. And then you go to the health food store, and there are 3,000 different brands saying they're exactly the same. Okay, here's my answer. No, they're not. Ask for these 2 published papers on the Journal of Dietary Supplements. How's this? We're the only CBD that has a randomized controlled trial and tracked 5 million bottles to prove that it's safe for the intended use. So if we wanted to be unfair, which we're not, the only CBD that should be justified is this one. Now, if we came out and said that, you wouldn't want to listen to the show. So that's why we said it.
Well, I did want to ask you, as we get towards, wrapping up here, I wanted to ask you kind of the maybe the lower key questions, just like maybe do you have any thoughts on some of these other cannabinoids that are maybe being highlighted or spotlighted as maybe they'll be a product of a CBG or a CBN? Do you think are there any other cannabinoids that have as compelling a body of research as CBD, or perhaps if not as compelling enough to warrant, coming out with them as a concentrated cannabinoid extract?
Okay, we are at the beginning. This is just the beginning. I mean, the things we're hearing about cannabinoids like THC V8, I mean, there's some really esoteric, potentially remarkable compounds that are hidden in this plant that we will need to unlock. Now, Rob, this is where it is nature and science, and this is where CV Sciences is right on the bleeding edge. Technically, if you take a minor cannabinoid by itself and highly concentrate it, now you're in the drug space. You're in the drug space. That's not a dietary supplement. It's certainly not a food.
You're saying in the pharma space.
Pharmaceutical drug space. And so that's one of the things that I hope, as more people get comfortable with this, that they will see different product, different market, different customer. I want to go back to the cannabis doctor that I spoke to yesterday just for a second. He made such an interesting point. Rob, this is a doctor who practices traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture that does cannabis medicine, full plant cannabis medicine, that told me he's learned enough about cannabinoids that he says he goes out for these runs, and he says he'll take 2 gummies with 25 milligrams each of isolated CBD. And at that amount, he really feels it as an anti-inflammatory, and enough, he says it's like a glider, right? He says, I've studied these cannabinoids and other things long enough, and that's so fascinating to hear that from a cannabis doctor. Let's go to the other side. What's pure THC? That's called Marinol.
Yeah.
That's been around since 1985. What is it prescribed for? Not eating, wasting away, AIDS, eating disorders, cachexia. Dr. Duffy, my boss, we mentioned him earlier, he was on a panel recently where they were debating the entourage effect. Like this paper that came up that said there is no entourage effect. And I love this answer from my boss. This is really great. You'll love this. He said, well, okay. Well, I'm a clinician, and I remember patients telling me a few things about Marinol. That's just the isolated THC in the little orange pill. He said, well, the reports are that people don't like it. They report psychosis. And when you look at all those banks, the data banks that keep track of how many drugs are stolen, isolated THC, Marinol in the pharmacy is never stolen. Now, wait a minute. Let me say this. We all know that people love cannabis. The idea, if that pill was exactly the same, people would use it, feel the same, and steal it. Now, if that's not the best evidence that we can come up with, pure CBD is for epilepsy, and pure THC is for when you're not eating and you're in the ICU. And somewhere in between all of that are all these different products. So ask for, what's the evidence on your finished branded product? What's the evidence on the finished branded product? And if you don't like that answer, then of course you can get access to medical cannabis if you're in a state where it's legal, or you can grow your own. And we want you to go to an independent health food store because that's the center of change. I'll say it again. My humble opinion, the health food store is the most radical storefront in the history of the world. That's where all the magic happens. And after the FBI raided Erewhon in Boston and clocked people in the skull for wanting to be macrobiotic, okay, that's never going to happen again, because we're going to learn so much about nutrition and so much about taking care of ourselves that when someone tells you that this isn't safe, you can go to PubMed yourself. You can read our papers. You can find out they have an agenda. Everyone has an agenda.
Stuart, that is fantastic. And I just really want to thank you for being on the show and for giving such credible and thought-provoking information. Big shout out to Dr. Duffy as well.
Yes, let's please thank CV Sciences for always supporting these kind of conversations. I'm very lucky that I work for a company that is indulgent and visionary enough to know that things like this touch people's hearts. We're not here to sell you. We're here to try to convince you. If I haven't done so, we're sorry. I'll be back. We'll try again.